I'm joined by three remarkable women, all of whom have in different ways been building a better future for themselves and for so many around them. Please welcome to the stage Nat Campbell, Nisani Gnanasoorian and Elizabeth Kasujja. Give them a warm welcome, please. Hello. Thank you all for joining us. Let's start with some short introductions. Nat, can I get you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I think the Cliff Notes version is that I am a social entrepreneur and I started my first business at the age of 19. That wasn't social, it was a retail clothing franchise, but it started my entrepreneurial journey into everything that I do now.
Nisani?
Perfect, great. So my name is Nisani Gnanasoorian, as Tina earlier introduced me, and I am one of the Fast Laners alumni. So that is a program run by Uprising to equip young people with employability skills and help them find jobs. And of course, it was funded by the Queen's Young Leaders program that we're all here to celebrate today. And just a little bit about myself, I currently work in the development sector with a charity called Resist Development as a volunteer support officer on the International Citizen Service program.
Thank you, Nisani. Elizabeth?
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Kasujja from Uganda. I'm a 2018 Queen's Young Leader. I run an organization in Uganda called Clear Your Mind, where we work to destigmatize mental health and connect people who are dealing with mental health issues to the professional help they need.
As you mentioned, Nisani, you were part of that cohort of young people going through the Queen's Young Leaders funded programme with Uprising. That was all about getting your foot in the door of your dream industry. How did you get involved and how did it help you?
Of course, yeah. So I got involved because I found out about one of my friends who had done the programme and they recommended for me to go to the programme, and that's how I went into the programme. And the programme did a lot of things, three main things for me. One was being able to meet other young people who were in the same boat as me. And sometimes when you've worked so hard and you've applied for so many jobs and you've tried to get your best grades, but you're still unemployed, it can be really defeating. So finding other people who are still in the same boat, it's reassuring to know that you're not the only one. And then the second was, of course, they taught us how to write cover letters and CVs and public speaking. And as a child of immigrant parents who didn't ever formally apply for jobs and they don't have CVs, I don't know where I would have acquired those skills otherwise, because we don't get them taught in schools or universities. So that was another thing. And then finally, it didn't just end with the program. We were allocated mentors from the sector. And also Andy, the program manager on Uprising, was super helpful, went through dozens of interviews and dozens of job applications for me, which was so helpful. No was never an answer when I needed help, so that was really lovely. And I guess that's what's helped me to have a job at Resist Development today.
From your own experience and from speaking to others, can you tell us about some of the barriers young people face when it comes to landing their dream job?
Yeah, of course. So I think traditionally, it was thought that having a good education would help you get your dream job. But I don't think that is just simply enough anymore. And in fact, we have the most educated generation at the moment. But despite that, we have a huge employment crisis. So it doesn't really make sense. We've got education, but why is there still this employment crisis? And I think it's because there is a huge gap between education and employment. So young people go to universities, they work incredibly hard, get their scores, but then they walk out with a piece of paper, not the skills that they need for the industry, and a huge amount of financial debt. So how do we build that gap between education and between employment? So at the moment, I think we've got programs like Uprising that work on the supply side. So that's the young people and the students, and try to equip them with how to write a CV, how to perform in your interview. But I think that alone is not enough. We also need the demand side, so the employers, to work together to tackle this issue. And I think one really good example of that is Toyota, who comprised a list of 170 skills that they looked for in young people, that they looked for people who work in the auto mechanics industry. And they shared that with their competitors, and they came up with a sector level lists of things that they look for in young people, and then work together with the education sector to then come up with, this is what we look for, and start a curriculum, which is really good because now that the young people are leaving education system with the actual skills that they need to be able to get an employment. However, I think the biggest challenge is that we've got a huge generation of young people, the biggest ever in history. And actually the World Health Organization predicts that there are 1 billion young people that will be entering the workforce in the next decade, but there are only jobs for 40% of them. So I mean, there aren't even jobs for 60% of them, which is absolutely horrific. And we need to work together on finding solutions for those. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers to those, but it's really important to start this discussion and find out how we can combat that.
You are in work now, though. You do have a great job.
Yes.
How did you find your journey into employment? What helped you most?
So, of course, Uprising for me was a massive step forward because I felt that I had all of the skills that I needed to be able to get a job, but I just didn't know how to present that. And Uprising both gave me the ways to display that, how either through job interviews or cover letters or CVs, but also to like the confidence of yes, you can, and having a little cheerleader at the back saying, you know, you got this, you can do this interview, and you are capable of this job. I think that's really reassuring as well.
Elizabeth, you founded Clear Your Mind and won the Queen's Young Leaders in 2018 award last year in recognition of your work using tech to deal with issues around mental health, specifically in Uganda. Why was that important to you?
You'll find that so many young people deal with mental health issues, but because it's so stigmatized and we don't really know where to go for help, you keep to yourself, and then it keeps getting worse and keeps getting worse. And just to build on to what Nish just said, in as far as employability goes, so mental health issues could be ignored, but in actual sense, if your workforce is not being fully effective, if your workers are depressed or they are dealing with anxiety or they have a lot of stress, like everything is piling up on them, they are not being as productive as they could have been. In our parents' generation, you'd go through university and by the time you graduate, you have a job waiting for you. Right now, that's not enough. By the time you finish school, whatever you studied is obsolete. It's no longer enough. It's important to build up on the soft skills. It's important to build up on these other skills that were not so important before. And then you find that you come out into the real world and you feel you're ready for employment and no one wants you. So you come out of university, you look for a job 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, rejection, rejection, rejection. You decide, oh, maybe it's important to, get more books. You go back, get a master's, and it's still not enough. That takes a toll on your self-worth. You feel, maybe I'm not important anymore. It affects your self-esteem. It affects your self-confidence. So I feel, all in all, it's very important to pay attention to the mental health of young people. Like we've mentioned in the video, 60% of the population right now is under 30. All these are young people. We are the leaders of now. But how are we taking care of our own mental health? They say the mind, your mental health is the core of all your health. If your mental health is not doing well, your physical health will suffer, your emotional health will suffer. Like basically, mental health is the core that affects all the other aspects of your health. So I feel it's extremely important that we pay attention to that and we learn how to take care of our own mental health and we learn how to let go of that self-stigma. Because personally, when I started Clear Your Mind, it was a personal challenge as dealing with depression on a really major scale. But before I even suffered the social stigma of what does everyone else think about the experiences you're having, it was more of, oh my God, everyone thinks this about me. How will I? How do I express myself as weak? So I feel it's important for each of us as individuals to go into our spaces and tell people it's okay not to be okay, but talk about it, because talking about it helps. And
sharing your story helps because it lets other people know that they're not alone.
Exactly.
And they probably feel more open about talking about this stuff. What kind of impact has your service had on people who are struggling, young people in Uganda?
So we've created a space, we've created a platform where people can reach out anonymously, because we found in Uganda, we have a population of 40 million people and just one national referral mental hospital, and we have 34 psychiatrists to cater to that population. That means just one psychiatrist for over 1 million people. And World Health Organization says 1 in 4 people globally is going to suffer a mental health condition at some point in their lives. So you find that there is this huge gap between what we are saying, like, this is what needs to be done vis-a-vis what is actually being done. So creating a platform where people who have this stigma in society, just to refer to a story, when I landed, the immigration officer that checked me into the UK was really amazing, because when he asked me what I was here for and I told him, he literally led the rest of our conversation, because he said there is so much stigma surrounding mental health, and he dealt with depression himself. His brother had schizophrenia, but the moment you mention, I have a mental health issue, everyone thinks you are crazy and you belong to an institution. So there is this huge stigma globally. So creating spaces where people can come together and just talk about this, like, it takes away the power of mental health problems victimizing the people that they do.
And Elizabeth, from the connections you've made through the Queen's Young Leaders Network with some of the people here today, would you say these issues resonate with young people globally, not just in Uganda?
Yes, actually, from my exposure because of the Queen's Young Leaders Program Network, I realized this is not just a problem in Uganda. You see, globalization trends have enabled the world to become a global village. Like, we are more connected than ever before, but it has widened the space between people within the same community. Like, I can literally just get on my phone and be able to message someone in Asia, someone in Europe, and I'm in Africa. But there is also this huge gap between me and the person seated right next to me. So how do we actually leverage that power? How do we create a stronger sense of community within the people that we are actually together with? And you'll find that from the networks I have built and the interactions I have made, the issues that affect us are all the same. Like, suicide is now the 3rd leading cause of adolescent deaths in the whole world. That's not a statistic from just Uganda, that's the whole world. And when you give people a platform to hide behind a mask, for lack of a better way of putting it, when you give them a platform to really talk about the things that affect them, ensuring that their identity will be protected, you'll find that we are all dealing with the same problems fundamentally. We are all looking. It reminds me of a book I read by Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning. It's intrinsic, it's more, different people are searching for different things, but we are all trying to work towards being the best version of ourselves. You find some people find meaning in starting and running organizations. Other people find more meaning in being financially independent and, having a job that provides a steady income so that they can take care of their responsibilities. So respecting all that, I'd say to a great extent, we are all fundamentally the same, and this is a global challenge.
Now, it'd be good to get your response to what you've been hearing so far from Nisani and Elizabeth.
You can see me nodding.
Yeah, I know.
When you were talking about employment, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, what about entrepreneurship? If the jobs aren't there, you can create your own. And I know it's easier said than done, but actually it was the thing that I realized when I was at university. I didn't fit in the workplace. I couldn't get my head around this concept of going to work from 9 to 5 and being told that I must go to lunch at 1 o'clock, and then someone tells me how much I get paid and someone tells me something else. To me, it just felt like an alien concept. So I had to create my own opportunities. In terms of mental health, the decision to become an entrepreneur, I knew that I would be insane for most of my life because to be an entrepreneur the boundaries of sanity are blurred oftentimes, usually because you're coming up with an idea or saying something's possible that everyone else thinks is impossible. Yeah. And so for you to go from, well, everyone in this room is telling me no, everyone is saying this can't be done, to, I can see a way, actually I can see 10 ways, actually I can see 10 ways, and those 10 people that told me no are going to tell me yes, I'll just figure it out. That requires a different way of thinking. And you have to be willing to almost become resilient to setback, resilient to changes in society, resilient to your family and your friends and the people around you saying, this might not work, you cannot do this. And actually sometimes putting their own judgment about what they can't do on you. And so listening to you, it took me back to the very first moment I decided that I wasn't going to go down a very specific path, but I was going to become an entrepreneur, I was going to run my own business, and then that led me to sitting on boards. So the other way that I realized that I could make a difference was I joined a number of charitable boards. And that was because I saw lots of organizations being run for people that looked like me, without anyone that looked like me around the decision-making table. So that was the other driver. I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And so I put myself forward and into these opportunities where I was the only woman, I was the only woman of color, and I was significantly the youngest person in the room, probably by about 25 years. And I'm still in that scenario. And it didn't faze me because I knew that I had a right to be there, because people were making decisions about people like me. And again, it's that boundary of, do I let the scenario overwhelm me? There's lots of conversations at the moment about imposter syndrome and people not feeling like they should be in a room. I walk in a room and I'm like, I'm supposed to be here. More so than everyone else, I'm supposed to be here. Again, it's the slightly weird entrepreneurial insanity thing. But that's the beauty and the resilience of just thinking in a different way. So I would champion entrepreneurship over and over and over again, or an entrepreneurial way of thinking about things over and over again, because it does help with a number of the barriers.
I mean, it's slightly intimidating sitting next to you because you have achieved so much. You are an overachiever, superwoman status, I think we can give you. Although your Twitter bio says you're just doing my bit to make at least one life better and have fun along the way. Very humble. Can you tell us about any setbacks you've experienced during your entrepreneurial career?
Multiple. My failing at the moment is that I forgot to put a pin on my dress, which is why I'm holding it with one hand. So they're daily. And my setbacks in life are things that I knew were coming. So when I started my first business at the age of 21, I was in university, and I said, I'm going to run a business in my last year of university. I'll figure out how I pass my degree. But I'm going to run a business. And I'd made the decision to open a retail clothing franchise in the April, and I'd opened it by the September. So in 6 months, I was basically running a shop. And I was also going into my last year of university. At that point, I knew something was going to go wrong. I was either going to fail my degree or the shop wouldn't work. So I set up the shop so that I didn't have to run the store. I had a team of people running it for me. And I tried to get to lectures whenever I could. I actually managed to get through my last year of university, pass my degree by about this much, and make it back to London. And I was in London one day, and I opened the papers, and I saw 700 jobs go as Morgan declares bankruptcy. Now, Morgan was the brand that I had bought into. And overnight, the business that I had been building completely disappeared, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I made a decision in that moment to close the store, rebrand it, all within a week. And the thing that didn't work was I moved too quickly, and all of the money I had as working capital absolutely disappeared. And so I was faced with the option of either declaring myself bankrupt or paying off £50,000 worth of debt. And I decided that I wanted to be a magistrate at some point in my life, so I wouldn't declare myself bankrupt. I would figure out how to pay £50,000 worth of debt. So I had 3 jobs. I worked 3 jobs to clear off the debt, and at 30, I became debt-free. So from 22 to 30, I was basically working to pay off a debt, but also working, building my entrepreneurial resilience muscle, building up the idea of who I wanted to be. So that's one setback that felt really heavy at the time. I remember being in bed, not wanting to get out of bed, because to me it felt very public because I was in Lancaster in a university of 10,000 people. Most people knew that I ran a business and that I was doing various things. And there are multiple things like that. I get things wrong all the time, every day. You suck it up, you move on, and tomorrow is another day.
We hear a lot of people say that Generation Z, millennials, are the snowflake generation. I'm not saying that, I'm saying a lot of people say that. How do you feel when you hear that? And what do we get wrong when it comes to the way we talk about young people in this generation? Nisani?
Ooh. I think a lot of people underestimate the power of young people and everything that we are capable of and the things that we can do. And events like these where we celebrate young people are too rare, and the mistake lies within the underestimation of young people. Even if you look at the climate strikes that are going on that are led by young people, it's crazy. That's all done by the young people. And I think a few years ago, even a few months ago before that started, no one would have even thought that young people could do that. So I think the mistake lies with underestimating young people.
So just listening to you,
yeah, go on.
When we say young people, what do we mean? I'm 36, do I qualify?
Sure.
Great.
Of course. Don't look a day over 30, by the way.
Elizabeth?
I think ultimately everyone needs to remember that today, in this moment right now, is the youngest you'll ever be. It's the oldest you've ever been, so you are really wise, but it's also the youngest you'll ever be. So it's important to keep that in mind, that you're only as young as you believe you are, and you're the youngest you'll ever be in this moment. And so many young people today, when they are categorized as young people, they feel like, I have something to prove. I'm a young person, but I can do this. I think it goes beyond the labels. It's important to draw within yourself, and that's why one thing that the Queen's Young Leaders Program really did extremely well was the mentorship program. You have this person who has been there, done that, that is assuring you that the age doesn't matter. Like, you are hand-selected, and it doesn't matter if you're not a Queen's Young Leader, you are a runner-up, or you're an award winner, or just someone who hasn't selected, but you're doing something to make a difference in your community. Your age doesn't matter. What really matters is the fact that you have a vision, you're trying to improve your society, and you are being the best you that you can be today.
I'm glad you mentioned mentoring. I found, having shared similar experiences to you, Nat, being in a room in broadcasting some of the jobs I've done where I am the only woman of colour, what mentoring has helped me, having a sponsor, somebody who's championed my career. What do you think is the role and the value of mentoring?
So I think there's value in aggressive mentorship. So some people you can have coffee with and it's absolutely fine, but aggressive mentorship is a relationship where you know that someone will send you opportunities because you have said, you've told them what you want, what it is that you want to achieve. They'll be there as a reference for you. They will hold up a mirror to your face when you're actually just being a bit of an idiot and say, okay, you think you should have this thing, but what have you done? Did you say that you wanted X, Y, and Z? Do you have the skills? Are you working hard enough? So I call it aggressive mentorship. Having a coffee and a nice chat, I don't think in the way the world is right now is not enough. And so if you have mentors, make the mentors work harder for you. And if you are a mentee, make sure your mentor knows what you want, what you need, and don't let it be a passive relationship. And the best mentorship relationships that I've had and sponsorship relationships I've had, everyone knows what's expected and everyone knows the distance traveled. And we don't let that relationship just peter out for years and years. It's like in 6 months, we will be here. And if we're not, then we assess why. And that might feel like quite a hard way of thinking about life and a career, maybe too calculated. But if you're committed to having a life that you love and doing work that you love, I don't know if there is any other way of thinking about it.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, of course. I completely agree, especially with the aggressive mentors, because I think sometimes when I look at people in the industry that I'm like, yes, I exactly want to do what you do, and I want to try build that relationship, I'm quite guilty of asking for what I want. I almost feel like I shouldn't, and I try to hold back. But I think at the end of the day, if you ask, and if they can't provide it, then that's fine. You move on. Like, you don't get if you don't ask. And I definitely am guilty of not being able to network and ask people for mentorships and find mentors for myself. So, and that's something I'm working on daily. And yeah.
Personally, a mistake I made was thinking I'll reach a certain point in time and I'll be ready to give back to society. I feel that now I know better. I know that at every point you're at, you are in a position to give back. You are in a position to mentor someone. It might not be that you're mentoring the kind of people you envision mentoring, but you can mentor someone in school. For example, recently Clear Your Mind started these campaigns where we go to high schools just to talk about mental health and see if teenagers know what mental health is and how to take care of themselves mentally and stuff. And we found that I think the older you get, you forget. Like, the questions they were asking, it was almost like I wanted to tell them, it's okay. Like, right now, there are certain decisions that are weighing so heavily on you. In 5 years, they won't matter. And I wish I had someone telling me that back then, and being able to give back to those young people and having them say, oh my God, you made a difference for me. You know, I interacted with a student that self-cut, and working in the mental health sector, I had the assumption that this starts at an older age where you're exposed to social media and you're comparing yourself to people on a global stage. And this child told me they had been traumatized, like back home, they had other issues. And that brings us back to the issue of mental health. People come from different homes where different factors are coming together to affect their mental health negatively. So we need to start talking about this as early as we possibly can. But we also need to tell our young people today that you're not too young to give back. You're not too young to mentor someone. You know, whatever you're good at, if you're good at communication skills, teach that to someone while you improve yourself to give back even more. So.
We're obviously here to celebrate all the inspiring work that's being done around the Commonwealth by young leaders like yourself. But the review has also picked up on some of the major challenges, some themes that have been coming up. And it's found that a major challenge facing young people from across the Commonwealth is a lack of confidence and a feeling of being inadequate. And many people reported feeling isolated, experiencing depression, low self-worth and anxiety in the context of jobs, employment, their prospects for the future, and outside of that. What do you think about that?
I think, yes, of course. As someone who struggles with mental health conditions at the moment, even after I have been employed, I think I find it so hard being able to go into work every day and being able to actually fulfill my potential. I think there's something within me. When a lot of young people, like you said, when you are labelled as young people, you feel like you have to do something. And I think that's great. You feel like you have this potential within you, you have this fire within you. But sometimes you have things like mental health or other things that almost prevent you from doing it, and it's trying to break that barrier and come across. And although mental health is a huge issue with unemployment, it also needs to be addressed in employment. Once people, not just young people, anyone gets into employment, everyone faces mental health issues. We need to make sure that the organisations that people work for are equipped for that. They have ways that people can take off their stress and make sure that the workload doesn't get too much. There are lots of different ways that you can ensure that it doesn't get to that state where someone has to be clinically diagnosed as either depressed or anxious. And if you can prevent that earlier on, I just don't see why not, because as an organisation that employs people, you should invest in your people, and it's so, so important. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about at work was creating almost well-being plans. So that would be writing down, so everyone, if they would like to, would write down their different states that they have of stress, so either too stressed or burned out, and what each of their symptoms are, how they would display those symptoms, and then what would help them to overcome that, because everyone's different. Mental health is unique to every single person. There is not a prescription fix for everyone. So even the fact that where our work is open to have that conversation and invites for us to have that conversation, I think it's absolutely huge, and I hold myself fortunate to be at a place like that. But I shouldn't, there should be standard, and everywhere mental health should be a discussion. And I think employment is a huge factor for why people end up having mental health conditions.
It feels like we have made progress when it comes to talking about our mental health, but we haven't achieved the same sort of stage yet in talking about workplace mental health yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'll find that in Uganda at least, 74% of people who report having mental health issues are already employed. And much as poverty and lack of employment were originally cited as one of the causes of major mental health issues, you find that it's not something that's only limited to people who are unemployed. People who are employed are, you know, like going into it and just doing what it is they need to do. I was recently reading, there is a psychologist I like, it's called Professor Peter Fonagy. He wrote an article that said, poor mental health is no longer an individual condition. It is a social condition. If I show up to this panel and I'm in tears, or I'm very depressed and, you know, I don't want to come out of my shell, it's going to affect all your energy. It's going to affect other people's energy, whether they realize it or not. So poor mental health has become very much a social condition, in the fact that much as it's not a communicable disease, it can still somehow affect you. So I feel that it's extremely important for employers, because employers might not realize, but if your workforce is depressed or dealing with anxiety or is highly stressed, or someone has PTSD or bipolar disorder, it's affecting their productivity. People will show up at work, they will sit at their desks from 9 to 5, but how many of those hours are they actually productive? How many of those hours are they actually contributing to, you know, the goals of your organization? So I feel it's extremely important for employers today to look into mental health in the workplace, ensure that the employees know what mental health and well-being is about, how to take care of their own mental health, how to identify that, you know, my colleague might be dealing with a mental health issue. How do I help them? Who do I refer them to? Because that way, the productivity of the workplace would also improve.
Yeah.
Nat, what's your approach to well-being in the workplace? And do you think we're more open now when it comes to talking about this stuff?
Most definitely, because I think people are being honest. I would say I can speak personally, again, because of my career pathway, I've had to focus a lot on self-care. I'm the queen of self-care and looking after myself. And I would say I'm lucky enough to be old enough to remember a time without mobile phones and having to walk to a phone box and put 20p in a machine to pick up the phone to have a conversation with my friend after school, even though we were at school all day together. The difference that we discuss is that we know how to disconnect, and we know how to reconnect to things that we love. And we use the things that we love to restore balance internally. And when I meet people at work, or I meet people socially that say, you know, I've suffered with some form of mental ill health, that thing, it's balance. And most people feel the trigger when they're off balance. And I always say, well, what's the thing? Where do you find peace? And not many people know where they find peace, or where they find a space and a place where they can just go. And so if you don't have that, it's about going on the journey to find that, whether it's fitness or getting outdoors. I've just bought 2 puppies, and so I never think about anything other than puppies and puppy food. But it's the really small things that enable you to switch your mind off, because it's very easy to be on all of the time. And actually what we need to reprogram and relearn is to how to switch off, how to be at peace, how to love things. I would love people to start saying, I love this, with the same passion that they are now talking about their mental health.
And there's a responsibility for employers there as well, surely, because the line between our work and our home lives are now blurred, where we're expected to respond to emails at night. I can't tell you how many work WhatsApp groups I'm on now, where somebody will send me a message to see if I'm available to do something and expect an immediate reply. So there's a responsibility on both sides. What's your take on how the jobs landscape is changing at the moment, and the fact that there was a time where you'd graduate and it'd be fairly easy to find a job?
So one of my other hats is that I recruit senior people into the civil service as a civil service commissioner. And so I see lots of roles coming through that are interesting, meaty, diverse. And the thing that they're looking for are people that are flexible. They're looking for adaptability. They're looking for people that can deal with uncertainty. In my language, that's being an entrepreneur, obviously. And so if you are wondering about, what's the next thing I should potentially develop, it's being okay with things not being okay. It's being okay with not knowing the answer. It's being okay with having to flex and adapt and change and almost shapeshift a little. And the people that I see progressing have developed that skill. And then I would say the other bit of it is communication. I'm a deep introvert, but I've learned how to communicate for me. And so that's another journey that I think people need to go on. What's the best way for you to communicate? And it doesn't have to be about standing on a stage or being on a panel, but how do you create relationships with people that means you can deliver results and get things done? Those two skills, over and above everything else, seem to be coming through quite a lot.
Another thing that came up was young people feeling like they don't have a voice. I'm including you in young people. Young people don't feel like they have a voice in the decisions that are being made about their lives. How can we change that and empower them to use their voices, to make sure their voices are heard?
Start listening groups. Start listening groups when there is an issue. Like you said, there were people making decisions about people, working for people that look like you, but there was no one there making those decisions, and that just doesn't make sense at all. And start listening groups, get young people into those discussions and see what works for them, what's not working for them. We have a world which is evolving so quickly now. I think for a long time, everything was quite similar, and then now with the influx of technology, everything is changing so quickly. So I think getting young people's voices into that, because at the end of the day, we're working for young people and trying to get to understand what they are looking for and equip them with what they need, is what I think would work best, definitely.
I think also utilizing the networks that are available to us, you'll find technology has really made everything so much simpler. I struggle with public speaking, and someone recommended, why don't you join a Toastmasters group? And I joined the Toastmasters group on Facebook, and I have seen myself improve. Like before, it was harder to join networks that could help you improve yourself, but now it has become so much easier. And then you'll find there are organizations like, for example, Comic Relief, Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust. I'll use myself as an example. When you have a funder as flexible and understanding and trusting as Comic Relief has been for me and Clear Your Mind, when Comic Relief came in after the Queen's Young Leaders Award, when they came in to support our work at Clear Your Mind, I was ready to quit. It's not that I didn't believe in my vision anymore. It was that there is so much pressure, there is so much pressure on young people. In Africa, most of us, after you grow up and you graduate, it's your responsibility to get a job and take care of your younger siblings and your family and stuff. So I felt I was at that point where, I'll keep talking about it and raising that awareness and encouraging people, it's okay not to be okay. There is help available, but I was ready to move on into employment, although I knew I was designed for this. And then in comes an amazing organization like Comic Relief to say, you know what, we believe in the work you're doing, and we believe you know the best direction to take this. We believe you know the landscape. So they give you funding and still allow you to make certain key decisions. And it's not set in stone that, you know, I want to set up a hotline for Uganda. This is what I want. It's more, okay, so you want to set up a hotline, but what are some of the things you need to have in place before you set up a hotline? So I believe organizations like that are in positions of influence to help young people make the best of themselves and their organizations and their visions. Organizations like that are extremely important.
Now, what advice would you give to young people and young entrepreneurs who are struggling to create their own lane and make their voice heard in decisions that affect their lives?
First of all, you have to believe that you have your own lane and focus on your lane and not the lane to the left or the lane to the right, which means looking at other people and comparing. If you focus on what you're doing and really focus on what you're doing, not from a purely financial perspective, money is definitely important, but from a, am I happy? Yeah. Am I doing my bit to make one life better and having fun along the way, which is my checkpoint? That question, that is ultimately how I have seen progress. Keep it really simple. Overwhelm comes in when everything gets big and complicated and turns into a mammoth task. But if you're just doing your bit to make one life better, one life will turn into 10, will turn into 100, will turn into thousands. I just wanted to come back on the other point. Join a board. Find an organization that you believe in their work, look at the board, contact the chair, say I want to join, find out when the tenure of the current board member's time's out, put your CV in. I applied for the board of Big Lottery 3 times. It took me 3 years, and on the 3rd time, they said yes. And I didn't mind that they said no the first time or the second time, because I was pretty sure they needed me around the table. So I joined on the 3rd time. So join a board and get that strategic, big, meaty insight and start leading decisions without having to be the ultimate leader, or leading organizations without having to be the...
That comes back to resilience though, doesn't it? Being resilient, and just because you get knocked back once, it doesn't mean you don't try again. That leads us nicely on to our final question before we open up to the floor, and I'd like you all to think about this as well. Can you tell us what meaningful employment is to you, Nisani?
So, I graduated with a degree in biomedical science. And when I graduated, the only thing I was sure about is not wanting to go into a career of biomedical science. So for me, the meaningful employment is all the reasons why I didn't want to do biomedical science and what else I was looking for. So one main thing was being able to connect with people and really interact with people from all different walks of lives and different backgrounds, because I think that's where all the magic happens, when you work together with different people. One of the other things for me is actually being able to have positive impact. And in a career of biomedical science, if I would have had gone to research, no doubt, I think there are biomedical scientists who are doing incredible things for medical advancements. But for me, I'm someone who likes to actually see and experience the change that my work is having. So that's something I really value in my employment life. And then the next thing is being valued by whoever you're working for. So that could be a financial incentive, but more important than that, they should invest in you for your development and make sure they actually should care about you as an employee, and invest in you, make sure that you are growing in the position. As much as you're there to support the organization, it is also a space for you to grow in that organization, find other opportunities within the organization. So I think an organization who values me comes above all for everything for me.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think I agree with what she just said. And I think meaningful employment also means, you know, what does it mean to each individual person? What does meaning mean to you? To me, it could mean running a successful mental health organization in Uganda. To someone else, it could mean working for an international organization. For another person, it could just mean having a steady paycheck that ensures financial independence. So I feel that it's important to understand what does it mean to you as an individual. Ultimately, something I like to say, and I really believe in, we are all pieces of a puzzle. what makes a puzzle beautiful after it's complete is after all these different pieces come together to create the bigger picture. On the other hand, today's society has somehow put us in a box where we are trying so hard to be like someone next to us, as opposed to discovering what it is about each of us that makes us different and authentic. And I feel if we spread the message really well that we are all just pieces of a puzzle that are trying to create the bigger picture, and it's okay to be you. You prefer to be formally employed, that's great. You prefer entrepreneurship, that's awesome. You prefer, you know, like whatever it is you prefer that gives you meaning, I feel that's what's really important to discover and then focus on.
Yeah, everyone's purpose is different, isn't it? I feel like you've covered it already, Nat, but just to sum up, meaningful employment to you.
So I'm going to sum it up as moments or behaviours. Meaningful employment means there are points in your day when you laugh from the gut. There are points in your day when you have conversations that make you go, aha. There are conversations and points in the day where you don't look at the time because the day is going so fast because you're doing work that meets your level of challenge and skill. And then when you open a paycheck, you feel that salary reflects the value that you bring into the organisation. Those things wrapped up for me is meaningful employment.
Thank you. And now we'll open it up to you. We have some roving microphones, so just raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question to our panel. Tell us who you are, where you are from, and who you'd like to ask your question to. Who's going to be brave enough to kick things off? Harry, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Harry Pinder. I was part of the 2018 Queen's Young Leader Award winners. I guess my question is something that I'm sort of still trying to figure out, which is how do you make really meaningful impact? Like a lot of us, for example, I've got a day job as well as I sort of do my project and things on the side. So how do you, and with well-being in that perspective, I guess how do you make an impact? Because that's something that I know, especially like our generation really wants to, at the same time, be sustainable and again, have this well-being conversation.
Do you want to kick that off now?
Yeah, so A Very Good Company vision is to create a world where people can feel good, do good, and live better. And lots of people challenged me on the order of feel good and do good. And I fundamentally believe that if we don't look after ourselves, you cannot look after other people. If you don't have a positive impact on your own self, it's very hard to find the resources to give to others consistently and well. And so to combine everything that you're saying, I think it would start with being good to yourself, taking time out for yourself and really assessing whether or not the things that you're doing meet the vision of the world that you want to create. And then from that point, I think you'll see the impact happen because you're being authentic and you're walking on your path and you realize your part in the bigger jigsaw puzzle. I don't think when something's meant to be that you have to over-egg it or overwork it. It's a lot easier when you're just moving in flow, and it feels a bit more woo-woo. But whenever I've run at something really, really hard and it's not working, it's because it's not meant for me. And as soon as I just hang back a little, actually it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with what you've just said. And also, like you've said, I think there is a hustle culture with young people at the moment having to do your day job and a side job and then something that you're passionate about. And don't follow that hustle culture. Don't run after one thing after the other. It doesn't have to be like that. Take care of yourself first. And it's okay to say no. If you don't want to do something, just say no. And it doesn't have to be no, never, but it could be, you know what, this is something I'm really passionate about, but I want to work on maybe getting a promotion at work first and get that first, and then come back to it later. Because if you try to juggle too many balls at once, there'll be nothing to juggle anymore.
Good advice.
How do you eat an elephant?
One bit at a time.
Exactly, and piece by piece. So for me, my advice would be you create your huge vision, your impossible goal, like whatever it is, the big picture, and then break it down. Recently, we had a really amazing training by Comic Relief. It was on budgeting and accounting and financial sustainability. And one of the things I struggled with prior was creating a work plan, that was a hassle. I knew the big vision, but I didn't know how to go about, how do you break it down to the small actions? And what I learned, what I took away from that training was, if you don't do the small actions, the big goal will never get achieved. So basically, look at what your big vision is, look at the big picture, and then break it down. For example, it could be something as simple as create a Facebook post every day, or put out a tweet every other week, or meet key stakeholders, or put myself out there, apply for job applications, whatever it is that falls under your list, list them down, all the small tasks, and then just one action at a time. Those small things, seemingly small things, they eventually add up. So one action at a time.
Thank you. Any more? Lady at the back, and then we'll come to you on the third row.
Hello, I'm Alison Gowman from the City Corporation. There are quite a few older people in the room, and I just wondered whether there's a message from you as young people, young leaders, as to what we older people could be doing to help you, or what we should be doing.
The question? Yeah. So what can the older people in the room do to help? I think it's listening and listen without being defensive. But that's not age specific. I think that's a general in society. We've forgotten how to disagree well, or to have different opinions and it still be fine. And so in a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment, there are conversations about race, and a lot of people automatically go, I don't do that thing. And it's not, I'm not saying anyone does, but it's just, how do you listen and receive something without automatically going, that's not me? And actually just hear someone's feeling, intent, go away and process it before you then deliver what your response might be in the immediate moment, because actually the result might be a bit better. I would say in a different forum, and I think, Elizabeth, you said this with Comic Relief backing you, if you have access to resources that can help a younger person, being more flexible with how the resources are allocated and recognizing that the templates of business plans or whatever it was might not work, and so how do you adapt a process to enable someone with the talent to come through, and being open to that is definitely something else that would have benefited me 10 years ago.
Yeah, of course. And with employment specifically, I think there is a massive gap with the young people and then the real world. So people with experience, if you could build that bridge between those two worlds for us, that would be absolutely incredible. And like you said, like aggressive mentoring, because people who've been there, who've done that, will be able to help you so much better than someone who's never gone through it before. And when you always look at a problem in the past, it always looks easy because you know the solutions to it already. Whereas when we as young people are sitting in the problem, you only see the problem because you don't know what the solutions are. So I think that's where mentoring would be absolutely fantastic. And any resources that you have that you can offer, whether it's mentoring programs or whether it's funding towards programs, just bridging that gap between, say, employment, for example, and education, or whatever it is between where that bridge is missing.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important, especially the mentorship bit. My dad recently told me, so I told him about an event I was speaking at, and I was really nervous, and he asked me, what could I tell you that you can't find on Google? But that's not the reality. There is a certain expertise he has. There is a certain expertise I have now that I did not have 10 years ago. And when I tell a teenager, like when I'm telling them about that experience and how they'll go through it, and it's fine, you'll come out okay at the other end, they'll believe me more than if someone their age tells them, I read this and this. So we need you, younger people need older people, and older people need younger people to keep each other up to date. And I feel that the mentorship bit especially is extremely important. I was lucky enough to get, I believe they were the best mentors for the Queen's Young Leaders program. I got Gonçalo, Rebecca, and Tina, and I still talk to them to date because they took a personal interest. It went beyond, you are part of this program and we are being mentors, and it became, okay, this is what you want to do, this is where you are right now, and this is all the things you lack, and this is what you need to build up to get, because they can see the bigger picture. So I feel that also that demographic should go away, that, you know, older people, what do we have to offer? Like, you have the world to offer and the experience.
I'm going to take the final question from the lady on the third row.
Hi, I'm Siddhi from India, and my question is that how do you find people who are passionate about your cause and at the same time are willing to commit some time to join your team, especially when you don't have much monetary incentive to offer?
Depends on the level. So you can create an advisory board, and the incentive there is giving people an opportunity to give back, or to learn a new skill or engage in something that isn't the day job, so you can make that compelling. If it's about joining the team to do executive style work, then actually think about everything else that you can offer. And what is the timeline for being able to offer a salary? And so it has to be a negotiation and a deal ultimately. And I think that's the core of it. Structure what would be a useful deal and make sure it's a two-way, as opposed to a we do good things, and because we do good things, you should be working for us. Everyone should benefit in it.
Thank you very much. Finally, from you two, a word on to everyone who has been part of the Queen's Young Leaders programme. How can you make sure the legacy continues?
Yeah, I think the core of the Queen's Young Leaders programme was to discover, support and celebrate young people around the Commonwealth. And now that sadly the programme has come to an end, that doesn't mean we stopped doing that. So now it's down to us and you and everyone. So if you know someone who has potential, who you see has drive and ambition, discover them and then support them to getting and fulfill their potential. And like Elizabeth said, you don't have to wait to getting to a stage to be a mentor. You can mentor anyone at any time. So when you see that, nurture it and let people come out of it. And then once they do achieve something, no matter how small, no matter how big, make sure that you celebrate it and tell people about it. And it's like today, being on a board with these two amazing people is so inspiring. And just talking about all the things that people have done start to spark within you. It's I want to do this. And oh yeah, I had this idea in the back of my head, and it completely slipped, and it just brings that idea back and inspires people to do that. So I think talking about it, celebrating people and just taking on from it now. And of course, I'm sure there are so many young people in the audience today who have done incredible things that I can't even imagine. Please celebrate this, please tell people about them. I certainly would love to hear about them and be inspired. So I think just celebrating yourselves and others to keep going, have that snowball effect.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Thank you. Just to add to that, one of my biggest learning points this year has been learning to ask. I find it so easy to provide help. Someone says, hey, can you help me with this? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll fit it in. I'll somehow help. And yet, at the back of my mind, I had this notion that it's inconveniencing when I ask people to help. I was very surprised to find out people are very willing to help. All you need to do is ask. And you have all these resources available to you. Resources are not necessarily only money. It's also the people. Right now, technology has really made the world a global village. You could literally go on your Facebook and put out a question, and you'll get recommendations from different places in the world. So don't be afraid to ask. Also, utilize all the opportunities that are available to you. That could be in form of, having access to the internet. This is still a really big deal to us. Having access to the internet, there are all these opportunities available to you. Having access to these networks, having people like Francis Brown in your corner, that's really amazing. So utilize all those opportunities. And then, attracts put yourself out there. For example, I am very passionate about mental health and destigmatizing mental health. And I had not realized it, but my Facebook quickly turned into and mental health. I did not do that intentionally. It's just that whenever I had to make a post, it was somehow biased towards that. And then you find that you'll attract people that just want to make a difference, but they don't know how to go about it. So people will offer help you did not know you needed, and they'll be like, hey, I'm good at social media marketing. How can I help your cause? So put yourself out there and put yourself into the position of the people whose lives you're trying to impact, and just be the best version of yourself at every point in time.
Thank you. I want to congratulate everybody here for everything you've collectively achieved with the Queen's Young Leaders programme. Thank you to our panel. You are inspiring. I've gained some useful insights from that conversation. I hope you all have too. It was thought-provoking. We are going to draw this part of today's event to a close now. I think everyone's deserved a well-deserved refreshment, so please do make your way to the back of the room where they will be served. Before you do, you may have already noticed and been in the room behind you, there's a fantastic exhibition which has more information about some of the projects supported by the Queen's Young Leaders Grants Programme, and it contains a collection of short films made by young people as they reflect on their experiences and the impact their youth organisation has had in helping them overcome barriers. I'd really encourage you to go and have a look at it before you leave and listen to their personal stories of how young people have turned their lives around. It's well worth it. We also have a number of young people featured in these videos, individuals who've won Queen's Young Leaders Awards and people who've benefited from the grants here in the room with us today. Seek them out. It's easy. They'll be wearing a colourful lanyard, and let's continue this important discussion about how we can all support young people to step up as leaders and together make positive changes to our communities, companies and countries, because we are, after all, in this together. This might be the end of the Queen's Young Leaders programme, which was always intended to act as a time-limited endeavour, but one that was designed to begin a movement and momentum that would continue far beyond its own lifetime. The Queen's Young Leaders programme has helped propel young people forward on their journeys of change, but it's absolutely the ripple effect of these individual and collective actions that will ultimately continue to have an impact on people's lives for years to come. We all have a role to play in continuing to make the world a better place. I hope you've all felt inspired by what's been discussed here today, and that wherever you live, you can go forward and feel empowered to be the one to make a crucial difference for those around you. Thank you, and please show your appreciation for our panel.